Alright, what's going on, y'all? We are live on the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford, exclusively live on Twitch. Coming to you from the Denver area. And it's a good Wednesday here. Not so good for the future of the left, the short-term left and whatnot. But I will get into that shortly. As for today, I've finally got some music for the show. That way, when I go on break, I could take a break. I can go to a scene to play a song for a couple minutes while I'm gone, or do it when I wait for people to play it shortly before the start time. That way it gives my viewers a bit of time to get in the stream. But I still gotta work on the screen, the image screen for that as well. So yes, it will definitely be. It is a slight good development as I work to grow this channel. And one of the things, and I think, and it's a slight majority in favor of sports-related stories today. And it's going to start off with what happened yesterday in Senate. So yesterday, Chuck Schumer finally forced the vote on the voting rights bill for the People Act. So let's go over what happened with that. Republicans on Tuesday blocked a procedural vote to advance a sweeping voting reforms bill in the Senate, sinking Democrats' attempt to begin debate on their landmark legislation overhauling the nation's election laws. With the 50-50 vote, the effort, which garnered the last-minute backing from Senator Joe Manchin, fell far short of the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster. All Republicans opposed the voting rights bill and voted against taking up the legislation, which is Democrats' answer to restrictive voting measures enacted in GOP-led states following the 2020 presidential election. Here's the thing with this whole 60-vote majority. The facts are, it's going to be really rare for either party to get to the point where we have the conditions where either party could get those 60 votes without having people turn against the minority vote. So there's that, and that's why so many people are trying to call for an end to the filibuster, because let's be honest, that 60 vote threshold is way too high. And what it really should be is 51. But let's not get it twisted. Even whether it's 60, 55, 51, Democrats are going to come up with a way to fall short. So if they only needed a simple majority for that, you would have seen that be a 49 to 50 vote instead. And that person may not have even voted at all to try to save face or have that person not be present to vote at all. Point is, this is a system by design, and when they truly don't want something to pass, they come up with a way to make that happen. And with this filibuster still in place, it's really not that hard. 50-50 vote. Since it's not a reconciliation vote, Vice President Kamala Harris doesn't even need to factor into that. In fact, she said on the voting rights presided over the vote, after the vote, she told reporters the fight is not over. Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer made similar comments, saying, "This vote, I'm ashamed to say, is further evidence that voter suppression has become part of the official platform of the Republican Party." Well, you know that's a pretty Captain Obvious type statement, Chuck. And there's a reason why you had a decent portion of Republicans vote in favor of Juneteenth. And that's because Juneteenth was just a symbolic vote. And they're willing to concede on stuff that ultimately doesn't change anything. And that's why you see Republicans never vote in favor of anything Democrats want on voting rights, is because they believe everything that Democrats propose would be bad for their party and bad for their ability to win. And that ain't wrong. And they're not wrong about that, to be honest, from their point of view. The Senate's failure to advance the bill is likely to further fuel calls from progressive Democrats to do away with the filibuster rule, which requires 60 votes to advance most legislation. Ahead of the vote, Schumer reiterated the effort was to open debates on voting rights legislation, saying protecting voting rights is worthy of debate. This is what this vote is about. Let's not forget that Democrats aren't voting rights saints either. Yes, that same Democratic Party who rigged both the 2016 and 2020 primaries against Bernie Sanders. And they've also done plenty of other rigging in other various primaries throughout the country against other progressives trying to get into office. And they'll do it much more frequently when it's just D versus D elections. They're always going to try to do all that they can to make sure that the establishment-friendly Democrat is the one who wins. Once in a while, they will let someone break through, and the people from time to time will overcome the rigging of the system. That way, and it's also part to try to make sure voters still have faith in the system, which is already in a horrible state to begin with. Are we going to let the most dishonest president continue to poison our democracy from the inside? Schumer said. Or will we stand up to defend what generations of Americans have organized, fought, marched, and died for, the sacred right to vote? And this right here is definitely not, well, yes, Americans have fought for rights to vote, to include more people into the process. But the thing is, the party has, this oligarchy has devalued what you get out of that vote as they let more people into the process. And that's what needs to be known about this two-party system where the main point of this For the People Act was for Democrats to enable their stranglehold on vote blue no matter who. The far worst parts of this bill would have only further nailed the coffin shut on getting a third party off the ground. And we've seen a few states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where the DNC worked to get Green Party off the ballot. And this liberal bird brain logic is that, if the third party's, that Green Party's not available, then you've got no choice but to vote Democrats. No, that's not how it will work. In fact, what really happens is you just make that person who's probably going to vote Green Party pissed off and potentially burn a bridge with them. And that's how that goes. The bill, known as the For the People Act, or S1, would be the greatest overhaul of election laws in a generation, revamping government ethics and campaign finance laws while seeking to strengthen voting rights by creating automatic voter registration and expanding access to early and absentee voting. It also includes some measures that would require states to overhaul their registration systems, limit states' ability to remove people from voter rolls, increase federal funds for election security, and reform the redistricting process. So, truth about this is the paragraph that makes it sound good that you have people voting for this act. But the reality of many of these things is you're more likely to have success getting this done at the local level. And being in Colorado, a lot of these things have been done. In recent elections, the voters have voted on this stuff, like reforming the redistricting process, open primaries, independent people, more independent involvement in the conducting the election process. While it's still flawed, Colorado is well ahead of so many states, and I think the people trust it, even though we still need to be skeptical of things that happen within elections. Facts are, Colorado I believe has the highest percentage of election participation in the country, which I believe they may have even, the highest number I remember was 77%. And I believe in this past election it may have gotten over 80%. And that's going to be extremely good for participation rates for an election. And the thing is, when you do full mail in balloting, people are going to participate, even if it makes people more likely to be involved in the process, even if they don't feel like anything is really going to change. And when you have a opposite approach to things like states in the South, then people are going to lose that incentive altogether. Especially when there isn't that energizing candidate who is running a really contrasting campaign to some far righties. President Biden on Tuesday urged Congress to send the bill to his desk for signature. We can't sit idly while democracy is in peril here in America, Mr. Biden tweeted for the test vote. We need to protect the sacred right to vote and ensure we, the people, choose our leaders, the very foundation of which our democracy rests. We urgently need For the People Act. In wake of the Republicans' filibuster, the president called for their opposition to suppression of the bill to end voter suppression, another attack on voting rights, sadly not unprecedented, and pledged more action on voting rights. This is far from over, Mr. Biden said in a statement. I have been engaged in this work my whole career. We are going to be ramping up our efforts to overcome again for the people, for our very democracy. Look, I don't know about that one, Joe. You sound like a guy who's perfectly fine with the system, which you have very well created some of the worst things about it, like the 94 crime bill, the predatory credit system and loan system, which he is very unrelenting and unforgiving about. Then we get into this Joe Manchin part, which I had discussed on Monday, or Friday, where he went into the watering down this bill a bit for him to be more comfortable on it. And the problem is now, that focus is now going to be shifted on January 6th again. It was a pathetic event on both sides. And the fact that they got so many liberals fear-mongered on this shit is ridiculous. People are constantly being kicked out of their homes. They still don't have universal health care. And yes, that means access does not mean coverage. People are still going to be struggling to find jobs, even as the majority of them are creeping back to normalcy. You've got people who are afraid of the authoritarian police state, but you want people focused on this January 6th shit, which is really like a staged version of a stretch of a basketball game where teams go up and down the court and you see like those rare moments where you see like 5 or 6 turnovers in a row along with 3 or 4 really easy layups missed. That's what January 6th was to me. Just an embarrassing stretch of a basketball game you see where teams are fumbling the ball up and down, missing some extremely easy shots. That's all it was to me. But the fact that they get so many liberals caught up in the fear-mongering of this, it's sad. I'm not really even sure why this article transitioned into January 6th, to be honest. But lastly, I'm just going to say the bad parts of this bill that make it even harder for third parties to get going, that's good enough for me to prevent for this bill not to be voted, even though Republicans are never going to be opposed to this in good faith. But bad faith opposition is what I'll take for now, even though that's really what it is. And you can't really say anything more about it because we know even if Democrats push together a bill without those third-party poison provisions, which I got the answer for you. That's not going to happen. They still wouldn't pass. And the point of this article is liberals are going to try to keep you on that voting hamster wheel to try to vote more blue people in. But I'm telling you right now, that's to see right through that. This system is rigged against real progress. And until more people rebel against it, you're just going to see more dangling of the carrot in front of you ever so often. Lucy's going to continue to pull the football out from underneath you as you think that the answer is just being faster, and Charlie Brown the average voter never sees that. So the Biden administration has been really signaling a crackdown on the left, socialist, communist, Antifas, and this tweet comes from Ken Klippenstein. New U.S. military training document calls socialist a terrorist ideology and lists them alongside neo-Nazis amid Pentagon crackdown on domestic extremism, per counterterrorism training material leaked to him. So first off, the people who want you to have universal health care, guarantee of jobs and housing, safer communities due to getting rid of the oppressive police state, yes, those people are really terrorists. And that's really the same as neo-Nazis. Man, that's fucking stupid how this crackdown has been signaled. So this is from a sheet here. Introduction. This assignment sheet is designed to assist the student in attaining the knowledge necessary to perform the duties as an assigned anti-terrorism officer. B. Enabling objectives. C. Study assignment. Read outline sheet 2. Terrorism, terrorist operations. Read anti-terrorism. Chapter 2 and 3 answer the following questions and be prepared to discuss your answers in class. D. Study questions. In which basic terrorist organizational structures is characterized by distributed authority, redundant key functions, and a cell structure that allows anonymity of individuals operating throughout the organizational spectrum. 2. Difficult to identify and presenting a formidable challenge to law enforcement and intelligence agencies. This type of terrorist shares ideology and goals with the terrorist organization, but does not communicate with any group as he fashions his political aims and commits acts of terrorism. Really? See how absurd it sounds to equate socialism with neo-Nazis? This is really stupid, man. But when you're the oppressor ceding power, feels like you're surrendering. Just like when certain white people try to equate equality to being oppressed when it comes to shining light to issues of the black community. And that's what that second sentence feels like. That number 2 on that feels like to me. You've also got to keep in mind that Joe Biden constantly mocked socialists after he asserted himself in being the Democratic nominee. I beat the socialist candidate. I beat the socialist. People, I'm the moderate and they voted for the socialist. And I got more votes than the socialist candidate. No. And now, Joe Biden is going to take this to another level beyond the verbal mocking of socialists. If you thought the violence was bad last summer, watch. It's only going to get worse the next time there's an event that prompts outrage. It gets people into the streets. That's going to... Think about how much more aggressive that police state, which, by the way, Joe Biden is giving more money to than his predecessor, Donald Trump. As I went over on the show Monday, he's giving 200 more million plus to hiring process. And we've already been, and I've kept up with many of the moments where the budgeting for like ICE and police have been going up in this country. But there's really people on the right who want to talk about, who want to pretend that police have already been defunded. When the reality is, there's really only been a few cities who have done a really small cut to that budget, not even meeting the basic threshold of what really needs to happen there. And this number 3, anarchists, socialists, and neo-Nazis represent which terrorist ideological category? There's about to be some rough times on the horizon. And it's because of people who were so obsessed with who had the Trump derangement syndrome and felt like Joe Biden would be instantly the better choice. Well, I do understand the fear that a Donald Trump represents. There's more dangerous in the evil that acts in silence. And that's what you're seeing here when it comes to Joe Biden as opposed to Donald Trump. Because we knew that it was obvious what the rhetoric, the dangerous rhetoric and the threat that Donald Trump posed at times, especially during the most. He increased the tensions most when it mattered during last summer, and while I'm not underplaying the impact of Donald Trump fanning the flames, he really didn't back up that rhetoric that much. And a lot of it comes down to his incompetency. The reality is we just don't have a lot of time to fix this. And it's very dangerous that how much Joe Biden is moving in silence in creating the rise to blue fascism. And it's an angle that too many people weren't willing to acknowledge during the election. And how you expect to be shouted down by liberals when you tell them the possibility of Joe Biden being worse than Donald Trump. But what made it worse is even progressives are shouting down the left when you try to present the argument of Donald Trump being about Joe Biden being worse. And the brainworms that come from in response to that. So you like Trump better? No, dipshit. Both candidates are fucking garbage. What more is it that you need to understand. And tearing down Joe Biden is not an endorsement of Donald Trump. And the idea that we are incapable of simultaneously tearing down candidates, or the fact that so many people enjoy using deflex when it happens to the person that they feel is better. And I think this New York mayor race is a great reflection of our inability to tear candidates down simultaneously, and that if you focus a lot more on tearing one down over the other, it does not mean that just because you're not talking as much about person B that you're in favor of them. No, we gotta get away from that logic. And I think even people who were understanding of that possibility of Joe Biden being better, even then, I think even that group didn't understand how dangerous Joe Biden could potentially be. But I knew that this was an outcome, a possible outcome, especially when you listen to leftists of color. They were willing to say stuff like this was going to happen. And that's... But the other issue is, instead of people giving those the benefit of doubt to see if these things will play out, they try to cancel them. And we gotta get past that mindset of canceling opinions that you disagree with on first hand. And a great example of that is when Nico House, Combo Couch, and some of the other MCSC network were talking about, were being really critical of AOC. And look how true that turned out to be. My first instincts were, I'm not so sure about that. But, I'm going to wait and see if that becomes true. Instead of like, how dare you talk down on Queen AOC? I'm canceling you for that. And if you're really part of the left, you got to be able to let some dissenting opinions go and see how they'll play out, and not attack people over every little disagreement that we have on the left. And I think this Biden issue is this is just an example of one of those things that the white progressives constantly like to attack the left over anytime you try to make a case for Joe Biden actually being worse than Donald Trump. Real G's move in silence, and Joe Biden is a dangerous G because of all these things he's doing behind the scenes. He's not talking about this stuff in the media. So that's why he's the more dangerous person. The other problem is, there were people who sold us on the fact that it's easier to fight against neoliberalism. Joe Biden, and how's that playing out so far? Not so good, is it? Unfortunately, a lot of that came from some of the more higher prominent leftist personalities. And if you voted for Joe Biden, but you understood what your vote meant, that attack isn't so much on you. It's more to the people who are naive about believing the idea that Joe Biden would be pushed left. And the fact that you weren't really fighting neoliberalism. You weren't really making that choice. You were making that choice to... The choice was essentially boiled down to fighting neo-Nazism as opposed to neocon, because Joe Biden is not even a neoliberal. He's a neocon. And what you're seeing right now is fighting the neocon. Is that really going any better than fighting the neo-fascist? And the answer is no. And the negative consequence for the left is you had a chance to get a better, to build more left energy if Trump had his second term. And that very well may have been easier to pull some liberals out of the any blue would do ideology. But no. Now, Joe Biden has sedated a lot of the left. And further delaying the opportunity we have to push for progress, forcing us into having us and to have no other choice but to use our leverage outside of this system. But folks, that's not all that this Biden administration is doing quietly. Looky here. They've started to seize domains of foreign press. And this tweet comes from Samira Khan. When I tried to access a news website. Fuck you, Biden, for censoring journalism. So this Press TV was among one of the few domains that got seized by the United States yesterday. Press TV. No, I did not spell Rochford wrong. That's my actual last name. My last name is not Rochford. My last name is Andrew Rochford. That's not my name, though. Not my last name. But the point is, the Press TV is the website of where Richard Medhurst does work on, with, in addition to his own YouTube channel, Richard Medhurst. This was among the few sites that the Biden administration has seized the domain from. And some of these sites have had to get a new domain to continue. And with this setback that Joe Biden has made. But I guess that's all okay since Joe Biden never talked about fake news like Donald Trump constantly did. I'm trying to remember, for all the hate that Donald Trump gave the liberal media, did he ever try to seize domains of those liberal outlets he disagreed with? Oh. Hey, Ikiwu. But no. But what isn't much difference are between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is how agitated they get when journalists actually challenge them and not do the softball interviews that both presidents like to do. But overall, this is just another example of how much Joe Biden doesn't really differ from Donald Trump, and an example of how he is in a way slightly worse. Yeah. So much going on here. And the fact that, don't forget, they want to take down WikiLeaks as well and make sure whistleblower Julian Assange never sees the light of day. Yes, the same Biden administration, Tony Blinken, they talk about press freedom, but they keep Julian Assange extradited, and the goal is they would want him prosecuted. There's major hypocrisy on a free press, and neither party's truly for it. So on Monday, just after I ended my show, The Rochford Files, with your host Andrew Rochford, Carl Nassib of the Las Vegas Raiders came out as gay and pledged $100,000 to the Trevor Project. Las Vegas Raiders defensive end Carl Nassib on Monday became the first active NFL player to come out as gay. Nassib made the announcement in an Instagram post. "What's up, people? I'm at my house here in West Chester, Pennsylvania. Just wanted to take a quick moment to say I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest. I really have the best life. I got the best family, friends, and job a guy could ask for. I'm about to promo a tweet before I get any further into this. About to discuss Carl Nassib coming out as gay. And Damn, autocorrect. Forced me into misspelling his last name. But the first part of that paragraph is that Carl Nassib really shouldn't be the first player. It should really be Michael Sam. He was that defensive lineman from the University of Missouri that became the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He came out as gay during the draft process. And let's not forget, Michael Sam was a projected 3rd to 4th round pick at the time that he came out. Then following him coming out, you had several statements talking about how much of a distraction Michael Sam would be to the organization. Look at the free fall Michael Sam took. He went from being a 3rd to 4th round pick to barely being drafted in the last few picks of the NFL draft. I'm not trying to take away from the significance of Carl Nassib, but I want people to know that Carl Nassib really shouldn't be the first active NFL player to be gay. It really should be Michael Sam. If talent-wise, he wasn't going to translate to the league the same way that his collegiate achievements shown. And there's plenty of instances where great college players do not translate to the next level. But the point is, on the merit of his talent, Michael Sam should have been able to carve out a role as a backup lineman in this league for a while. But the NFL has a history of running away from these issues instead of embracing these moments. The NFL avoids and deflects. They pulled this shit with Colin Kaepernick. They allowed him to be demonized endlessly for him taking his knee to protest police brutality in this country. And they wouldn't stand behind him. And even when they tried to come out as being more correct on Black Lives Matter, they still continuously ignore Colin Kaepernick. And the fact that I know that Michael Sam is also being forgotten in this moment as well. I'm a pretty private person, so I hope you guys know I'm not really doing this for attention. I just think representation and visibility are so important. I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary. But until then, I'm going to do my best and do my part to cultivate a culture that's accepting, that's compassionate, and I'm going to start by donating $100,000 to the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project provides crisis intervention and intervention and suicide prevention to services to the LGBTQ plus community. Commended Nassib's announcement, saying in a statement that his donation will help scale our life-saving crisis services to reach the more than 1.8 LGBTQ youth who seriously consider suicide each year in the U.S. Said NAPSIB, they're an incredible organization. They're the #1 suicide prevention service for LGBTQ youth in America, and they're truly doing incredible things. And I'm very excited to be a part of it. Help in any way that I can, and I'm really pumped to see what the future holds. Reaction and Roger Goodell said the league is proud of Carl for courageously sharing his truth today. Representation matters. We share his hope that someday soon statements like this will no longer be newsworthy as we march towards full equality for the LGBTQ plus community. We wish Carl the best of luck this coming season. Alright, so here's the thing about it. Think about how few athletes have still come out as gay in the sports world. And the reason why I bring this up is I feel like some people are... thank you for the follow, Ikiwu. But the point I'm making is there's people who are downplaying the impact of this, and it's because they have the view of the societal acceptance being greater than what the acceptance is in the world of sports. And I think it's a good moment to remind people that it's really... the acceptance isn't as great as you think it is. And a lot of this LGBTQ movement has been co-opted by the liberals. And that needs to be something that's people need to be reminded of. Because if we had a greater level of acceptance, we would see higher numbers of athletes come out and be accepted as gay. And that progress is happening slower than you would like. And eventually, these things will become more normal. And we'll know. And honestly, the league where you have the best progress on LGBTQ is the WNBA. And it's going to take more time for other leagues to make that same type of progress. And we'll see what the development is from this. If Carl Napsib continues to finish out his career based on the merits of his talent, then it's going to be then it's only going to help more athletes come out over time. However, if Carl Nassib ends up being cut, like for example in training camp, then it's going to be a slight setback to have future athletes come out and be open to the world with their sexuality. So overall, I hope this is a step of progress for the sports world. Next is another Supreme Court case where they sided with a high school cheerleader who cursed online. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of a former high school cheerleader who argued she could not be punished by her public school for posting a profanity-laced caption on Snapchat when she was off school grounds. The case involving a Pennsylvania teenager was closely watched to see how the court would handle the free speech rights of some 50 million public school children and the concerns of schools off campus and online speech could amount to a disruption of the school's mission or rise to the level of bullying or threats. The 8-1 majority opinion was penned by Justice Stephen Breyer. It might be tempting to dismiss the student's words as unworthy of the robust First Amendment protections discussed herein, but sometimes it is necessary to provide the superfluous in order to preserve the necessary. Breyer said that the court has made clear that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression, even at the high school gate. But he said, we also have made clear that the courts must apply the First Amendment in light of the special characteristics of the school environment. The school itself has an interest in protecting a student's unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. American schools are the nurseries of democracy, the opinion read. Outbursts from JV cheerleader. Fuck school, fuck softball, fuck cheerleading, fuck everything. Brandy Levy, then in 14, wrote in 2017. She was reacting to the fact that, as a JV cheerleader, she had failed to get a spot on the varsity squad at Mahanoy Area High School in Mahanoy City, Pennsylvania. When school officials learned of the outburst, Levy was suspended from the JV team for violating school rules, but her lawyers sued, alleging the school had violated her freedom of speech. Levy is now 18 and a freshman at Bloomsburg University. Levy lauded the justice's decision on Wednesday, saying in a statement the school went too far, and I'm glad the Supreme Court agrees. And yes, it is right that the school did go too far in this instance. If that punishment had just been conducted in practice, then you're not getting this issue of this doesn't get taken to the Supreme Court if the school just if the coach had just punished this cheerleader and made her do more running or something. If that was all the punishment was, then this isn't a Supreme Court case. And as long as that punishment wasn't anything beyond suspension, then I'm not talking about this story right now. Young people need to have the ability to express themselves without worrying about being punished when they get to school. I never could have imagined that one simple Snapchat would turn into a Supreme Court case, but I'm proud that my family and I advocated for the rights of millions of public school students. And yes, I feel like this is a case where this is just a student who showed frustration over what had happened in her school life. So this is an instance where the punishment went too far. And here's the dissent from Clarence Thomas, writing that students like the former cheerleader who are active in extracurricular activities have a greater potential by virtue of their participation to harm those programs. Here's why I disagree with that dissent. The reason why that isn't true in this case is because this student did not do anything that was discriminatory, like racist or homophobic, xenophobic, or any of the other discriminatory language. So I think that dissent isn't valid in this instance. And it would be a different situation if it was a racist rant instead. For example, a profanity-laced screen delivered on social media or at the malls has a much different effect on a football program when done by a regular student than when done by the captain of a football team. So too here. And once again, this is him trying to make the argument that we're still a far too sensitive of a society. But the thing is, we're not as sensitive about just someone showing frustration with profanity. This is the type of growth that we've had is that we can have a angry rant and not have much come of it. Justices grappled with where to draw a line. Steve Vladek, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at the University of Texas School of Law, said Wednesday ruling is a rare win for students in speech cases at the Supreme Court. Today's decision may seem obvious to those who have a hard time seeing why public schools should be able to regulate any and all off-campus speech by students, but the fact is that the court is identifying circumstances where they can't is actually a big deal. And I agree. I think this case right here is one where you can't overstep the boundaries on. Although the line between off-campus speech that students and can't regulate is less than clear. The fact that there is a line that will have significant ramifications for just about all public school administrators going forward is a rare win for a student in a speech case before the current court. He added. But there's also not very many cases where there isn't a offensive language that is used that discriminates against a minority group in this country. That's why you haven't seen this come up often yet. At oral arguments, several of the justices struggled with where they could draw the line if they allowed schools to discipline students for speech directed at the school that occurs off campus. Breyer, for example, had acknowledged that Levy used unattractive swear words, but he questioned whether it caused a material or substantial disruption to the school. This is why I said if you just handled the punishment in practice, that this wouldn't even be a case right now. And we would still, but the good thing about this becoming an actual case is we now have an instance of where to draw the line on allowing students to use their free speech. Otherwise, we would still be waiting for this moment to come, and we would only see the ones of offensive, discriminatory language still. I don't see much evidence that it did, he said, noting teenagers when talking to each other often swear out when they are off campus. I mean, my goodness, every school in the country would be doing nothing but punishing, Breyer said. Which is why you have to limit the amount of times you actually play that card. David Cole, an American Civil Liberties Union lawyer for Levy, said his client was merely expressing frustration with a 4-letter word to her friends outside of school on a weekend. She wasn't sending a threat or an attempt to bully another student. That was also another point that needs to be addressed, is some of this discriminatory language that you see students use in like these racist rants on social media is often threatening to those communities in the process. The message may seem trivial, but for young people, the ability to voice their emotions to friends without fear of school censorship may be the most important freedom of all. Lisa Blatt, a lawyer for Mahanoy Area District, told the justices that the line should be drawn not based where the speech occurred, but rather caused a substantial disruption to the school. Off-campus speech, particularly on social media, can be disruptive, but because of the internet's ubiquity, instantaneous, and mass dissemination. The High Court held then that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, but said some speech on school grounds could be punished. The justices took into consideration the special characteristics of a school environment and said that public school officials could regulate speech that would materially and substantially interfere with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school. The opinion, however, dealt only with speech on school grounds related to the school. Levy won in the lower courts. A district found that the school has not shown that she waived her speech rights as a condition of joining the cheerleading team. A federal appeals court affirmed, relying on the fact that the speech hadn't occurred in the campus environment, which would include school-sponsored events and field trips. Breyer disagreed with the reasoning of the lower court opinion that held a school can never regulate speech that takes place off campus, but at the same time, he declined to set forth what he called a broad, highly general First Amendment rule stating just what counts as off-campus speech. And instead, he allowed that while the cheerleaders' rule posts were crude, they did not amount to fighting words. He said that while she used vulgarity, her speech was not obscene. In addition, her post appeared outside of school hours from a location outside of school, and they did not target any member of the school community with abusive language. He added that she used her own personal phone, and her audience consisted of a private circle of Snapchat friends. Breyer said those features of her speech diminished the school's interest in punishing her. So pretty much overall, we shouldn't, this actual punishment from your speech as a student should be an exception rather than the rule. And I've mentioned that exception of discriminatory language. Hold on for a moment. So the fact remains this is a very good outcome for freedom of speech here. And one that will make sure that these institutions do not overstep their boundaries on punishing students. So last night, LA Lakers guard Alex Caruso arrested in Texas for marijuana possession. He was arrested and released on Tuesday for possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia, according to Texas A&M police. Both are misdemeanor charges. Lieutenant Bobby Richardson of the Texas A&M Police Department told ESPN's Ramona Shelburne that around 2 p.m. Central, Caruso tried to board a flight at Easterwood Airport, College Station, Texas, which is located on A&M property. The Transportation and Security Administration searched Caruso's bag and found an herb grinder that contained marijuana, Richardson said. According to online records, Caruso was arrested for possession of less than 2 ounces of marijuana. He was released after posting bond. Caruso played collegiately at Texas A&M. He is an unrestricted free agent this offseason. Since signing with the Lakers in 2017, the 27-year-old has played a key role off the bench the last 4 seasons. He averaged 6.4 points, 2.9 rebounds, and 2.9 assists in 58 games this past season. The reason why I wanted to cover this story is I wanted to point out how with marijuana being legalized in so many states that I'm glad that less people are flipping the fuck out and losing their shit over this, because the reality is this really shouldn't be a moment where you lose it over an athlete getting arrested for marijuana in a state where it isn't legal. And I'm not gonna move the goalpost either and say, well, he should have followed the rules of that state. No. I'm more upset at the states where it isn't legal yet. So I'm still not going to get mad at him for not following the rules of his state, the state that he currently occupied. Hi, DFKGF. So this is why I'm not going to punch down on him for getting caught in a non-legal state. So instead, I'm going to punch up on the states which still haven't legalized marijuana, like Texas, for example. I'm in Colorado, one of the first 2 states to legalize marijuana. And now, I believe 34 states currently have some form of marijuana legalization. And there's still going to be people wanting you to punch down on Alex Caruso for getting caught in a state where it's not legal yet. And even though it's easy to do just because so many people hate the Lakers, I'm not going to waste my energy doing that. And I'm glad that the marijuana legalization in this country has really been the response to this has largely been big deal. Because I remember in the early 2000s, most of the discourse would be people losing it anytime someone got arrested for marijuana. And I'm honestly glad that we have progressed as a society to where we don't have to overreact to every single instance of a high-profile person being arrested. And this is one of the examples of that. Because there's so many non-violent drug offenders stuck in prison. And all those people need to be freed. And we know most of those non-violent drug offenders are mainly black and brown people. But where's the progress on getting marijuana legalized at the federal level and freeing all the nonviolent drug offenders? Crickets. Because Joe Biden, the person who can currently make that happen, does not believe in federally legalized marijuana or freeing the nonviolent drug offenders. Mr. Author of the 94 crime bill, Jim Crow Joe. Before I get too far off into the tangent here, this should be a moment to show that I think this is the main point I want to close this segment on. Oh, go for it. DFKGF is that this story should be about the state where this marijuana isn't legal, as opposed to getting caught. Okay, let's see what you got, DFKGF. I honestly haven't gone into strong detail on that just yet. Okay, I've got it up in the queue, and I'm gonna move that one. I'll try to cover it after these next two sports stories that I have. So I'll move it ahead of the New York City mayor race. Before I get started, I'm gonna try to get more people in. Because I'm about to talk about the high school basketball coach who encouraged his team to throw tortillas at Hispanic opponent. All right, let's get into this article. A San Diego area school district voted Tuesday night to fire the head coach after tortillas were hurled at a team from a mostly Latino high school. Coronado Unified School Board voted 5-0 in a closed session to release J.D. LaPerry of Coronado High School, and also discussed but didn't take action on student discipline, the San Diego Union Tribune reported. Hello, Requentes. Blue Fascism. Earlier in the stream, I talked about Joe Biden trying to crack down on the left as equating like socialist and anarchist as domestic violent extremist. So that's gonna be more. That's gonna be in towards the beginning part of the stream, just after I discussed the vote that happened in Senate on the For the People Act yesterday. And if you go to my previous stream on Monday, I talked about it in the beginning of the show as well. And he's actually started to crack down on foreign press as well by seizing their domains. But for now, I'm talking more about sports-related stories. There had been a squabble between coaching staff from both schools after mostly white Coronado beat visiting Orange Glen High School of Escondido 60-57 in overtime in a division championship game. Witnesses alleged while Perry shouted expletives at Orange Glen coach, "Get your kids and get the fuck out of here," the Union Tribune said. Video shared on social media showed at least two Coronado students throwing tortillas in the air directed at the other team. Coronado High School Unified School District Superintendent Carl Mueller issued a public message of apology that called the act reprehensible. Now, I'm going to play the video of that real quick.
So we're starting tonight with
but
a
I'm
major
going to keep
development.
it muted and just move to the part where they show the tortillas being thrown. It's up top. But you also have to keep in mind that if you're throwing tortillas at Hispanic students, it's just like the watermelon and grape ins. If you went to black people and decided to throw like grape soda and watermelons at them, see how extremely racist it is to throw the food that's associated with the a race at them. So let's get back down to the article. I do not condone this behavior. Coronado High School does not condone this behavior, is already taking appropriate action, he tweeted. Both school districts, along with Coronado Police and the California Interscholastic Federation, are conducting investigations into the incident. Wayne McKinney, captain of the Coronado basketball team, has said his players and coaches have received hate messages and death threats over the incident, according to the Union Tribune. On Tuesday, he called the tortilla throwing unsportsmanlike, but not an act of bigotry. It was not based on race or class. It was simply a great game between two teams, McKinney said. I think many people are making Saturday out to be something that is not. Even though they were not intended as racist, we cannot ignore that our guests, these children who played their hearts out, felt attacked because they were Hispanic, school trustee Whitney Antrim said during the meeting. And yes, it is true. If you're... The message you clearly sent was a form of racism. And even though you think just throwing tortillas was innocent and not intended to be that way, that's exactly what happened here. And what you see a lot in high school is this is the type of things that have the potential to happen when you have a school from a white conservative neighborhood play against a school of that mainly consists of a strong person of color community. And I know there's plenty of stories of that, of like white schools using the N word in trash talk, and that's wrong. But we also have to know that this act of throwing tortillas, while a tortilla probably isn't going to hurt you, is extremely disrespectful. In a community letter Tuesday, Escondido Union High School District Superintendent Ann Staffer Fieri said that following its investigation, the district wants to bring together students from both teams to face one another, to confront, discuss, and grow stronger through honest discussions and sincere apologies. On that last part, I think that's an important point to make, because what schools don't teach you very well is racism. They don't teach you what is overt racism, what is covert racism. You really have to learn that on your own for the most part. And that's one thing that the education system really needs to improve on. But since so many of these right-wingers are fighting hard against things like critical race theory, well, yes, I do think that it should be. Well, they both go hand in hand, if that's just my opinion. And parenting, you're not always going to learn that from parenting, so you need multiple perspectives on this. And just limiting yourself to one perspective isn't going to be good for overall growth. And that's the main point that I wanted to make at the end. And this is a issue where people have the opportunity to learn and grow. And the education system doesn't always allow that opportunity for that to happen. So yesterday, this old clip from Muhammad Ali got shared on social media, and I saw Nick, Socialist MMA, of the Fred Hampton Leftists, talk about this clip last night on his stream, and he had a really great rant on that. And I wanted to add my reaction to it as well.
Bothering you? You look so...
I don't like his arrogance. I think...
You don't like...
No.
That's because I'm black.
No, sir. No.
You look like a nigga talking like this. The white people.
Oh, I beg your pardon. No.
Black people don't cut up what you're saying. You mean white people know. Listen, woman, everybody black watching this show knows why you don't like the way I talk. You don't like a nigga talking to you like this. Niggas never done that like this.
Sir, I beg
I know what it is. Don't tell me what you don't like.
I beg your
You don't know who you're talking to.
what I don't like.
I don't care what you don't like. Just buy a ticket to see me get my butt whooped.
No. Listen, I'm in a minority in this country here.
What's your minority?
I'm from England.
You're a minority. You're from England. You own England and America. You white. You can go anywhere in this city you want to go. Are you from England? You more freer than me. You from England. Didn't you say you're a minority? You know you can go to towns, move in neighborhoods. You can buy things over. You can open a business downtown Chicago and do business, and I can't do it, but you from England. Now, you got some nerve to come over and be mad at me because I'm proud and I want to fight and be confident and get my people to be proud and fight and do. We the minority, too. We've been a minority for 400 years, and you freer than me. You from England.
No, I'm not.
You are freer than me, and everybody know you free. How many of you white people here truly believe that she's not as free as me or any black man? She can open up a shop downtown. He can't even rent a store. You can. Don't compare yourself with no black man.
Okay. You want to talk about the... I'm sorry. You want to stand up?
got to be out your mind, lady.
She's a woman, though.
Whatever she is, she's a white woman, and she's in a white society. I'm not getting on that. The woman is most free of all black people in Chicago.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, I know about it. You're a hypocrite, and you think she ain't.
Well, what's the point you want?
Oh, yeah, my bad. I forgot to turn my mic out. That sucks because I talked for a few minutes without. Let me quickly recap what I said about this Muhammad Ali clip. I pretty much said that, as Nick of the Fred Hampton leftist said last night on the stream, that too many athletes are mainly only speaking of issues of identity, not enough on class, not enough on challenging power in our capitalist society. And I also brought up how, for example, the recent Israel and Palestine developments, when if these athletes are really having solidarity on the issues, there would have been numerous athletes that came out in support of Palestine, when the reality is only a few did, like Kyrie Irving and Damian Lillard, and how LeBron James isn't really doing enough on those issues, and really sheep herds for the Democratic Party like so many other professional athletes. And the last point is, when your progressive blue check celebrities fold on these left issues, it makes the ruling people think that they could get the regular people to fall in line with them as well. So let's get into that story that DFKGF requested. Is banning Trump from Facebook a First Amendment issue? Clarence Thomas, other conservatives say it is. The Facebook Oversight Board decision this month to extend the suspension of former President Donald Trump's account raised the ire of some on the right. Trump's account has been frozen since January 6th, but Facebook said it would consult the experts to determine when the risk of public safety has receded. If big tech can ban a former president, what's to stop them from silencing the American people next, said Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel. Conservatives' reactions reflect a new push to expand First Amendment free speech protections to privately owned forums. Dozens of states, many run by Republicans, have proposed legislation targeting private companies' policies, and conservative U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas recently questioned the constitutionality of private company control over user content. But the thing is, big tech has far too much control over the people's speech and platforms. Because in January, you've seen a lot of these left-wing YouTube channels get demonetized, like Status Coup, Nico House, Frank Analysis, Ford Fisher, Convo Couch. So pretty much the real... Oh, Graham Elwood as well. I know I'll probably forget some here and there, but there was a big crackdown on a lot of the indie left media in January, and that points to the problem of these channels just having big tech having far too much power, and the way that they use their algorithm to prevent independent media channels like mine from growing. And it's part of the reason why I'm more willing to be live exclusively on Twitch, even though Twitch has its problems as well with big tech. Oh, my channel is different because I'll talk more about sports stories that are related to politics. However, the First Amendment, which states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech applies to government entities, not private domains. The First Amendment only restrains government. It does not restrain a private company. In fact, those companies would have their own First Amendment right to determine, as a newspaper, for example, what will appear on their sites, said Gene Polinsky, senior fellow for the First Amendment at the Freedom Forum. A discrepancy persists between what some politicians want from big tech and company rights under the First Amendment, according to Ken Paulson, director of the First Speech Center at Middle Tennessee University and former chief and editor of USA Today. The bottom line remains Facebook is a private company, but it has its own First Amendment rights to decide what it wants to put on its services, Paulson says. And the fact is, free speech should be a bigger thing for the left. But the problem is, back when Trump got banned from Facebook, there were a lot of progressives cheering on the censorship of this, when it's actually bad to have this censorship happen. Especially in this example, every now and then big tech will crack down on the right, like in the same way they did with Alex Jones. But what really happens is it gets applied to the left far more, like for example with cancel culture. Even though cancel culture is mainly something that the right complains about, it really affects the left more. There are a host of people, for example, find that when they make a statement that Facebook or Twitter or someone deems to be threatening, they're banned or suspended. That is somehow a violation of free speech rights, said Polinsky. Terms of service are a contract between me and the company. They lay out those, and they have a right to enforce those. It is not a free speech matter. Twitter and Snapchat permanently banned Trump after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and YouTube, a Google service, suspended his accounts. So here's another thing to point out about this is that the mainstream media, that authoritative media source, the one that has the algorithm slanted in their favor on YouTube, you do know how much they're struggling to maintain their ratings now that they've lost Trump, and how that they're trying to make Marjorie Taylor Greene their Trump. That way that they can build up their ratings again on CNN and MSNBC, and that they may consider letting Trump back in. That way they can get the performative outrage back, and they can get eyeballs back on their channel. But the thing is, big tech companies are becoming the government when it comes to controlling free speech, which platforms get elevated, which ones get crushed. But the problem is Joe Biden is the preferred candidate of big tech. And as I talked about earlier in the show, the Biden administration is starting to seize the domains of foreign press. And that is bad. And in spite of how antagonistic Donald Trump was to the liberal media, he never went out of his way to have actual action that damaged press freedom. So what I'm saying is, Trump was the one with the empty rhetoric here. There was a lot more of that to his presidency rather than the action. And Joe Biden, a neocon, is following through on most of the action that allows big tech to have too much power over the lives of people and make it harder for independent media channels like mine and so many others to grow their platform. Like, for example, a few weeks ago, Jackson Hinkle posted a tweet talking about how far down percentage-wise so many of the big left-wing YouTube channels were. And like Kyle Kulinski, Jimmy Dore, Status Coup, you at least had like 60% down, while some of the smaller channels who have a harder time growing, like Jackson Hinkle's The Vanguard, 2 channels who did successfully grow substantially. That started last year, but it's going to be even more of a challenge. And this big tech censorship is going to be the biggest challenge to getting more people aware of how destructive this two-party system is to us. Oh, hey Kevin 09304. So the last thing I'm going to discuss for today is the New York City mayor race. It was the first one of ranked choice voting. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams appeared to take a fragile lead Tuesday in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary. But it could be weeks before it becomes clear who is actually on top in the first citywide election to use ranked choice voting. As ballot counting began Tuesday, a plurality of Democrats ranked Adams as their first choice in the race. It was tough to tell whether that lead would hold. As many as 207,500 absentee ballots remain to be counted. Voters' full rankings of the candidates have yet to be taken into account. It could be July before a winner emerges in the Democratic contest. Adams, a former police captain who co-founded a leadership group for black officers, was leading former city sanitation commissioner Catherine Garcia and former de Blasio administration lawyer Maya Wiley. Speaking to jubilant supporters, Adams acknowledged that he hadn't won yet, and that under the ranked choice system where there were multiple rounds of ballot counting still to go. We know that there's going to be 2s, 3s, and 4s, he said, but there's something else we know. What New York City said, our first choice is Eric Adams. Former presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who was far behind in early returns, conceded about 2 hours after the polls closed and vowed to work with the next mayor. Though this is getting me to the point of earlier in the stream when I said that we have to be capable of tearing down 2 shitty candidates at the same time, and how people don't have the cognitive and critical thinking to understand that. When I got back to when I was discussing Joe Biden be capable of being worse than Donald Trump, especially for the left. And this is just another example of this. We spent so much energy into tearing down Andrew Yang in this mayor race as he further moved further and further to the right in a way where he was hardly distinguishable from Eric Adams, the cop, who wants to bring back the terrible stop and frisk that the former mayor Mike Bloomberg had. Then the other thing is there's still a bit of misunderstanding with this ranked choice voting system. It's simple. You rank the candidates you like. And what you don't do is rank the candidates you don't like at all. That's simple. So, for example, if there's only 2 or 3 candidates you like, you only rank those 3. If it was clear that Adams and Yang were the 2 worst candidates in the mind of the left, and the best way to make sure that they don't get traction in this ranked choice voting is to make sure that you don't rank either of them. And we don't exactly know what the official rankings are at this time, but it doesn't look like that people understand that aspect of ranked choice voting is only rank candidates you're okay with winning, while making sure that candidates you really don't like don't get ranked at all. So that's where, and you have to be able to draw that line. Don't allow liberals to lower your standards of purity, because your average liberal has no purity test. And even when you have a lenient purity test where you only need one thing to get done, they still try to attack you on that. And that's the last thing I wanted to cover for today. I'd like to thank all of you for watching today's episode of the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford. And this has been the most lively chat. And I also thank all of the people that came into the chat. This has been the best episode of interaction on the chat, and I hope that continues going forward. Live streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for the follow, Kevin 09304. Yes, it is a spin-off to that old TV show, The Rochford Files, since my name is nearly identical to that show. So that's why I chose the name of the show for that. Don't forget to go to the YouTube page, The Rochford Files. So let me put that on the screen for a moment. And also follow me on Twitter at NugLifeComrade, NUGGLIFE Comrade, and also the Rochford Files YouTube Twitter page as well, at A Rochford Files. And here is the Rochford Files page on YouTube. So please go subscribe to that as well. If you miss the live stream on Twitch, I do upload the full streams on here as well. And please check out the recent interview I had with University of Denver psychologist Dr. Travis Heath. I've also had interviews with Sabby Sabs and Kamali Rose, and I will be working to get some more guests on the show going forward. So with that being said, thanks to all of you who joined me on the Rochford Files today. This is Andrew Rochford saying Goodbye and good night, and I'll see y'all on Friday.